Welcome to RPM with Scott Hunter, revving up the renewal, purpose, and mission in your life, where we're all about living the gospel in real life through prayer, practice, and intentional growth. So let's dive into ways to deepen your faith, find your God-given purpose, and live out that mission. Let's get this journey started.
Let's start with a question. When you hear the word disciple, what comes to your mind? For many of us, we think of a student, someone who listens to teaching or maybe takes notes in church, tries to live a good life. But when Jesus called people to follow him, he wasn't just inviting them to a classroom. He was calling them into something much deeper. You know, the word we often translate as disciple in the Bible is the Greek word mathetes, which means learner or apprentice. And that's where we got this idea from. In Jesus' time, an apprentice wasn't just someone who learned from a distance. They walked with their teacher, watched how they lived, and practiced what they did. That's what Jesus is inviting us into today. Not just to believe in him, but to follow him so closely that his way of life becomes our way of life. Let's look at some scripture. Matthew 4:19, where Jesus calls his first disciples. He says, "Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Now here's, in this passage, there's so much packed into this one sentence. First, Jesus says, "Come follow me." This isn't just about agreeing with his teaching. It's an invitation to relationship, to walk with him daily and learn from him. So then he says in the passage, "I will make you." You know, that's talking about transformation. Jesus is saying, I'm going to shape you. I'm going to change you. I'm going to prepare you for something greater. And finally, he says, fishers of men. Well, that's mission. Jesus is saying, what I'm doing for you, you're going to do for others. That's the heart of apprenticeship. Being with Jesus, being changed by Jesus, and then joining him in his work. You know, as we think about this, it becomes really personal. You know, I remember when I first started thinking about my own walk with Jesus as an apprentice, and I started thinking about it as apprenticeship. You know, it changed everything. For years, I thought about discipleship in this way. It was mostly about learning or reading the Bible or taking notes and trying to apply what I'd learned. And while that's a part of it, I realized something was missing. You know, it hit me when I read Luke 6:40, and it says, "A student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher." You know, that's the goal, to be like Jesus. Not just to know what he knows, but to live like he lived, love like he loved, and walk like he walked. So when I shift my mindset to apprenticeship, it makes me ask different questions. Instead of what do I need to know, I started asking, how can I be with Jesus? What is he teaching me right now? And how can I practice? That's a big thing, practice. How can I practice what he's showing me? And it became less about information and more about transformation. And that's really what this walk is all about, transformation. I think one of the biggest challenges we face in our culture is that we've reduced discipleship to a checklist. Go to church, check. Read the Bible, check. Pray, check. And those things are important, don't get me wrong, but they're not the whole picture. Apprenticeship is about life-on-life transformation. It's about walking so closely with Jesus that his heart, his priorities, his way of life starts shaping who I am, starts shaping our life. So here's an analogy I want you to think about. Just picture it in your head. Imagine someone who wants to be a chef. If all they do is read cookbooks and watch cooking shows, they might know a lot about food, but they won't know how to cook. To really learn, they need to spend time in the kitchen, you know, with a master chef, watching, practicing, learning from their mistakes. That's apprenticeship, learning from your mistakes, actually making mistakes and then learning from them. You know, the Bible is full of examples of apprenticeship. Look at the ways Jesus lived with his disciples. They ate together, they traveled together. They experienced life together. He didn't just teach them in a synagogue. He taught them through everyday moments. All kind of moments, all kind of situations, all kind of scenarios. One of my favorite examples is in John 13, when Jesus washes the disciples' feet. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Afterwards, he says, I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. That's in John 13:15. Jesus didn't just tell them to serve, he showed them how to serve. You know, another powerful moment is in Matthew 14. When Peter steps out of the boat to walk on water. He didn't get it perfect, right? He started to sink. But Jesus is right there to lift him up. That's apprenticeship. Stepping out in faith, making mistakes, and learning from the master. That's important. Learning from the master, practicing what the master's doing. So let me ask you, have you thought about your faith as an apprenticeship? Are you spending time with Jesus daily, learning from his word and practicing what he's teaching you? So I want to give you some examples, maybe an exercise you can try this week sometime. Maybe you could even push pause right now on watching this and try it right now. But number one, just take 5 minutes to sit quietly and ask Jesus, what are you teaching me right now? And then get something to write on and write down what he shows you. That'd be number 2. Write it down, what he shows you, right? Number 3, then ask, how can I put this into practice today? It might be something as simple as showing kindness to a coworker or taking time to pray for someone in need. Apprenticeship happens in the little moments all the time, right? So think about that. Take time to do that. Now that we've talked about what it means to be an apprentice, let's dive into the first area of RPM, renewal. Because here's the truth. Before we can live out our purpose, our step into God's mission, we need to be renewed by him. And that starts with abiding in his presence.